Hey everybody, Jen Hatmaker here, your host of the For the Love podcast. Welcome to the show. Gosh, I'm really glad you're here today. We are in a series called For the Love of Dating, Sex, and Relationships. What's fun about podcasting, y'all, is that when you're the host, you get to choose topics that apply to your life in the moment. So as I was ruminating about what to talk about in these summer months, I thought, you know what? I'm hitting the 2-year mark of being separated and eventually divorced after 26 years marriage. And so over on social media, we've talked about this and on other For the Love episodes with friends and experts. And so you know that I got married as a teenager. Literally, I was 19. And then after 26 years of marriage was on my own. And I didn't even know what I didn't know, right? In some ways, I didn't know parts of my own self. Certainly didn't know about dating. Gosh. There was a ton I didn't know. I had to figure out bills and money and just being in charge of myself in every category, having agency over all of my life and well-being, not just my heart and relationships, right? And my kids, it was just a quagmire for a while. And so all that to say, getting back into the dating scene was barely on my radar. I stayed out and didn't have an entry point like I thought I was going to. As you know, I've talked about it, but Tyler and I were just very casually and surprisingly connected from a mutual friend. We have the same publicist, and we were in New York at the same time, and we wanted to go see the same show that night. She's like, "Well, this is weird. The two of you are here in New York by yourself. You're going to the same show. Why don't I connect you?" And thus it went. And so lo and behold, we started texting, and then we started talking on the phone, and then we started FaceTiming. And I hate this word. It's so it's been so co-opted, but I almost felt like courting because he doesn't live here, he lives in Nashville. So we literally got to know each other, kind of the old-fashioned way. And now we're in love, but it's all been so radically different at this stage of life because we're grownups and we each have a lot of life behind us. And the person entering into dating this time, me, I'm not a barely out of high school moody teenager in love for the first time, right? I'm 47. I'm newly therapized. I'm in my own body. I have agency over my own life. I really am whole by myself. And I wanted to be that way. I'm not even saying there is one way to do this. I'm really not. I have too many friends, too many stories of falling in love and making a good connection in a different way. But for me, I knew I have got to figure out that I'm okay by myself, and that I'm not just going to reattach to another person because I need them. I'm only going to do that when I don't need them. I only want them. And however long that takes. And I wasn't in the dating world when I met Tyler. I wasn't doing it. I accidentally started dating. But so many of you either have been where I am, or you're there now, or somebody that you love is. In fact, I know this because you talk about this to me, and our community is really open and honest with each other. This is not a place for the faint of heart, dear ones. Dating after a significant relationship has ended, or a marriage has ended, or a partner dies, right? It can feel unfathomable. So I really wanted to get some advice from a guest who's been there herself and also has made it basically her mission on earth to crack this nut of dating in a more mature season of life. Today, I have Laura Stassi on the show. So Laura was married for 30 years. and went through what researchers have called a gray divorce, as in like gray hair, gray divorce. And she started to come out of the haze and daze that can set in when your life is completely uprooted in this way and at this time, like in the season, and started to realize there were a lot more people that had been through the same thing that she ever imagined. This is common. This is, in fact, it's a worldwide trend. In some other countries, it's called silver splitting. As she noticed that she was in plentiful company with other men and women who were coming out of long-term partnerships or marriages and trying to figure out what was next, she set her mind to research. And that research eventually turned into a very popular public radio-backed podcast called Dating While Gray. She's going to talk about the creation of that space in this episode. And by the way, lest you think we're only camping on issues unique to those of us who are, here in the middle or beyond, Laura tackles so many dating topics that are frankly relevant to every generation, literally. Like these are good best practices, even if you're just starting out. She talks about dating across differences, like including age, interests, race, all kinds of things, which, piques my interest, obviously. We talk about how to discuss finances when you're dating, like as a mature adult. And we're going to talk about toward the end of this episode, sex and what it's like to introduce sex with a new partner or more than one partner. If you find yourself single, and how to set yourself up for success there. And then even the possibility of deciding to remain single, which is a very real choice. And it's not a lesser choice, and it's not a bad choice. And tons of people are doing it. So we really plumbed the depths here. And I loved everything she had to say, obviously personally, but also I was thinking about you, listener, and what good like guardrails she was putting up and standards and ideas and approaches, and just kind of demystified the whole thing. And I just thought, look, there's a bunch of us here. There's a bunch of us here doing this, and it can be wonderful and it can be exciting. And this can be like one of the greatest seasons of our life. And so I hope this is hopeful for you too. I am so pleased to share my conversation with the absolutely wonderful Laura Stassi. Laura, welcome to the For the Love podcast. I am so happy to meet you. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
I'm happy to be here.
Okay. I filled my listeners in a little bit about who you are. You and I have something in common in that I have also recently ended a very long-term marriage, and found myself like looking at the dating horizon again, being like, I don't even know. I've been married for 26 years. I do not know. How does this even work? So before we kind of get into the brass tacks there, before we sort of drill into what it is that you kind of do in the world, can you give us a little rundown of life for you? Kind of the high level, like this is who you are, this is where you are, where you were when your marriage imploded, or however you want to talk about that. And then kind of the first few steps out of that sort of space of shock and awe.
Sure. So Laura Stassi, I'm a writer and an editor. I got married right out of college, and it was somebody, we didn't start dating until college, but I had known him since sixth grade. He was a neighbor. We went to the same high school, never had a romantic relationship.
Okay.
But, and I'm older than you are. So I'm 61. And so when we got married in 1983, that was kind of what people did. You go to college, you graduate, you get married. And unless something is really horrific in the marriage, you're expected to stay married forever. That's what people do.
Right.
And so there was nothing horrific in the marriage, but I mean, we were very different people. We had two kids, and I always thought, our differences complemented each other. Like my strengths were his weaknesses, vice versa. But it became very apparent toward the end of the marriage that he didn't want to be married to me anymore. He showed that in many different ways, but I was still hanging on because marriage, this is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
What about the kids? And so finally, in 2013, we had serendipitously sold our house. We had been talking about downsizing, and then a realtor just basically knocked on the door one day and said, "Do you want to buy your house?" And that set in motion the whole
Mm,
thing of
mm,
my thought was, let's move into a little apartment, get to know each other again, and then figure out
mm,
what we want to do. And
mhm.
his was, you know what, let's just go our separate ways. It's time.
Okay.
And so I come to now appreciate that. But at the
Mm,
time, I
of
was
course.
like, yeah, I'm no longer a wife. I'm no
Yeah.
longer really a mother. I mean, still a mother, but my
Right.
kids don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
I was working full time. I'm sorry, I was working part time and freelancing. So
Mm,
I really felt like,
mm,
who am I? What's going on? I need to figure things out. So I took back my maiden name.
mm.
I, moved. I got a full-time job. And when I finally started feeling like I'm okay now, and it took another 2 years for the divorce to become
Uh-huh.
final, mainly because I was like, oh, we're going to get back together. Of course, we're going to get back
Mm,
together. He just needs his little
yeah.
breathing. But, it was
Yeah.
just kind of denial, I guess. I don't know. Um, so when I finally figured all that out, who am I? Where am I living? How am I, making a living? I thought, it would be nice to start dating again. I have
Mm,
no idea. I had not been on a date in, since I was a young teenager. I'm sure for
totally.
you, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but telephone answering machines weren't even a thing the last time I had dated.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yep.
So as a writer, I have written several nonfiction books for young readers,
Mm,
and I was writing about health, wellness, and medical issues for the military community. And I thought,
mm,
I'm surely not the only one in this situation. Let me start researching this
yeah.
and just see what's going on. And my first, I guess, line of inquiry was, what do people who have been coupled up for a very long time, when they become single again, how are they meeting people?
Mm,
Online dating was kind of a fairly new thing, and it
mm,
sounded just really scary to me. Surely that couldn't be the only way people are meeting. So I started looking into that. And then I realized, it's not just how to meet someone, but once you do couple up at a certain stage of life, what are the issues involved with that?
yeah.
It's a much different trajectory. What does happily ever after look like when you both come to a relationship with maybe grown kids, or a certain spreadsheet of some sort, or parents you might need to take care of, or
Yeah.
so one thing led to another. And the public radio station in Washington, D.C. was, they sort of ran, for lack of a better term, a contest. They were looking for creative projects to turn into podcasts. And
Mm,
so I entered that contest, and I sort of won. The key thing I learned that really, researchers sort of identified this back in 2009 and 2010, but I was, a little late to the game, which
mm,
is gray divorce. This is a term researchers came up with.
mhm,
It is a thing. It used
mm,
to be you got married, and okay, if you made it to the 10-year mark or the 15-year mark, that's it. You're
yeah.
married for life.
Yeah.
And that is not the case anymore, because
Mm,
people are living longer and healthier lives,
yeah.
because women are in the workforce more. We're getting to a stage where people are thinking, okay, this relationship served me well when
Yeah.
we were just starting out, when we were raising our kids. Now what? Do I really want to go through the rest of my life with you? And
Yeah.
so that was really surprising to me, that I'm not the only one. There are a ton of people out there, millions and
Mm,
millions of people who, and I would say, even though you're not yet 50, I would consider that a gray divorce, because you were married for, you know,
yeah.
almost 2 decades, right?
Yeah. No,
So,
26 years. I got married when I was
okay.
19, Laura. Can you even fathom? Like, can you
Yeah.
even fathom? I grew up too, even though I'm just a hair younger than you. We're not that far off in age, but I grew up in a subculture where that path was doubly rewarded,
Yes.
kind of in a faith space. Like, you just get married young and you do the 50 plus years of marriage like your parents and your grandparents did.
Yep.
And so it was a strange, like, I can look back on it now with pretty clear eyes, but at the time, it seemed like a normal, reasonable, responsible thing to do to get married as a literal teenager. And so,
I'm getting chill bumps when you're talking because I totally get it. And, I look back now, people are like, why were you fighting the end of your marriage so much? And I was like, you know what? I was scared. I was scared out of my mind. And not that I didn't have the strength to be on my own, but I didn't know anybody else who was single. You get to a certain, and so if you grew up in a community where, it's very normal, you suddenly become, you're the oddball if you go down a different path.
For sure.
So, yeah.
I mean, even to this day, every single one of my best friends in the world, and we're longtime best friends, all married. Everyone's married to their first husband. It was really disorienting. Not just, I'm getting ahead of myself because I have a million things I want to ask you about, but it was really disorienting, not just to not be a wife all of a sudden. I literally went from being a kid to being a wife, and that role, but also socially. Like I'm different socially now in my structure. What does it mean to be almost 50 and single inside of a social structure that no one else is? So, I mean, it was a whole deal. It's still a whole deal. I want to go back a little bit because I have some questions I want to ask you about all of this. But
can I just interrupt for just a minute?
Yes, please do.
I love the word disorienting. That is such a great word. I call it, stranger in a strange land, or, so thank you for using that word because I think it's really important.
Really, our sense of orientation is then disordered. Like the way I oriented myself in the world, the way that I oriented myself to my community. I mean, marriage and family was a pillar of my work and all of it. So it really is disruptive in a lot of ways, and not just the one way. Like it's a lot of ways, which we're going to get into a little bit. But I'd like to go back one step. So you very, very casually are like, so I won the prize and then I got a show. So, very quick glossing over. Can you go back to that moment? So what you did, like, can you explain a little bit about how this turned into your work and what it is that you do now? You are now sort of, for lack of a better word, kind of a bit on a mission to help people like me figure this out. And so what does your work look like now? Because you did give us a rundown of everything you used to do, which is varied. It's varied. And now you're a dating expert. So can you connect those dots just a little bit?
Sure. And it's okay. So I've always been a writer and an editor, but I was primarily a wife. I didn't work full time while the kids were young, raising the kids. I was a wife and a mother. And as you know, we're writers, creative people are always looking for, a project they can really connect with. And they say, write about what you know. So when this happened to me, I was working full time for writing about health, wellness, and medical issues for the military community. And I always had in the back of my head, this would make a great book. I came up with this name, Dating While Gray, because what comes after gray? Divorce, gray dating. So I came up with this idea, and I was, I set up a little website and I was interviewing people. And again, it was mainly, how do people meet? So then, just serendipitously, I heard on the radio this, promotion about, we're looking for creative projects that we can turn into podcasts. And I barely knew what a podcast was.
Totally.
But I'm kind of a dramatic person. And same. I was in some high school plays. And so I thought, this would be a good radio show or podcast, having people call in with their issues, me talking to experts, blah. So I applied for this. It was a podcast incubation project program. There were over 500 people who applied. They chose 5 of us.
Wow.
And it was really, and what they said is they were not looking for audio experts or even necessarily writers or editors. They were looking for people who had creative projects that they believed in. And
Totally.
that was me.
Yeah.
Yes. And so we got a stipend. I think it was like $2,500 stipend.
Yeah.
They told us what kind of equipment to buy. They showed us how to use it. And at the end of this program, the goal was everybody has a pilot episode that we can then do with whatever we want to.
Okay.
Because as you know, everybody, podcasting is
Yeah.
in many
It's
ways a little bit like,
ubiquitous. Yeah.
yeah, self-publishing. Anybody can do it, which is great
Sure.
because you get all kinds of different messages out there. Now, because of my demographic of Dating While Gray is the public radio audience,
Yeah.
older people with disposable income,
Yeah.
intellectually curious, want to know more. And so the NPR member station in DC were like, let's just try this. Let's try this as a experiment. Let's give you, 10 episodes of first season and we'll see how it goes. And so I did the first season, and then again, actually the second season kind of part-time. It was a big success. The audience loved it, but then the pandemic came, and then there was the racial reckoning, and WAMU had, they were great, but they told me back in May after the season ended, so May of 2020, they said, we're not going to pick you up again. So I was like, okay. And meanwhile, I'm getting emails and people, Apple Podcast reviews, like, where have you gone? We need you. And I was like, you know what? This is a mission, because I'm talking not only to experts, but people who are bearing their souls about issues. Mainly, they're allowing themselves to be vulnerable because they trust that, we're not going to exploit them, or it's not for, the titter effect, but that these are real things. People who want to have sex and they're made to feel like they're horny, people coming out of long-term marriages, some of them because their partner didn't want to have sex, or because they themselves don't feel comfortable having sex, just many different issues. And so that's why it was like, we've built a supportive community. I started a Dating While Gray Facebook page. People were emailing and leaving voicemails, and just so I was like, this is something. I am on to something. And so a woman who used to work at WAMU moved to North Carolina Public Radio, became the content director. I connected with her, and that's where we had season 2. And then after the part-time season, I was like, this is, I can't be working at anything else anymore. So that's when it became this wonderful full-time endeavor with microcasts. So statistically, most women, especially in gray divorce, women are the ones who file for divorce instead of men. And the feeling goes, I thought that was interesting too. But I fall into that category. I finally filed for divorce. But my husband is the one who wanted the divorce, but he didn't. He wanted to be
Same.
He didn't want to be married anymore, but he didn't necessarily want to be officially divorced. And so I talked to a relationship coach, and he put it in great terms. What he told me was, men, when you're just dating, men are more likely than in heterosexual relationships, men are more likely to end it than women. But once a man gets married, especially this older generation of men, they feel like they need to do everything in their power to stay in the marriage. But that doesn't mean being a good partner. That means developing workarounds so that they won't file for divorce, like drinking too much or working too much or having affairs or whatever. So it's not like they're more in it than the woman. They just don't feel like they should actually take the bull by the horns and go ahead and end the marriage.
That's interesting.
I thought it was really interesting. And I one of the very first people I talked with, he was like a 63-year-old man, and his wife told him one night she was leaving, and she moved into their kids were still in high school. And she moved into an apartment down the street, and he goes, oh, it was because of the raise she just got. She now felt like she could leave. And I said, well, were you happy in the marriage? She goes, no, I think I would have sooner or later asked for a divorce, but I just didn't think I had the power to do that, or so So we're, I don't know where we're
No,
going.
no, I can only imagine what you've sort of uncovered. Some things may be expected, some things not. The data will tell the story of what's actually happening. Now, the whys underneath it are something to be sussed out. Like, that is, it's really interesting. It's your like entry points into this space and what you have discovered. Like, I can imagine at this point, having constantly interviewed and spoken with other people, men and women, who are telling their stories of ending one thing, starting another, re-entering the dating scene later in the game. You've probably formed at this point a clearer idea of how dating works, like up at our ages, right? And so I too kind of had an idea a little bit of what it was. I was only maybe half right. And experientially, you kind of see it for what it is the longer you're in it, especially in your work where you've like absolutely drilled down to like the bottom of the ocean on it. So can you talk for a second, like kind of on the outer edges of the thing? What is your like initial advice for someone who just very recently has found themselves single after 20, 30 years of marriage, perhaps, but they don't necessarily want to be single forever? Because some do, and that is understandable.
Absolutely.
And okay. Like, that's okay too. Like there's a lot of beautiful possibility of being single. Like when we finally are old enough to be mature and we have money, like it's fun. It can be really fun. You can really, that life is beautiful too. But for the ones who are like, I'm new here and I'm overwhelmed. And what would you say to that person who's just kind of at the starting line here?
Yeah. So, and this advice is actually good for women and men, even in happy relationships, because there will come a time, especially for women, that they're going to need to learn how to live on their own. If statistics bear out, there are so many more older women than men because men statistically die sooner. But again, I've talked with older men who have outlived 2 wives.
Sure.
So everybody needs to learn how to be on their own happily, financially, emotionally, physiologically,
So good.
So you just need to be comfortable in your own skin, in your own space, in your own skin, however that may look, whether you have roommates or, whether you're sometimes even sharing a house with your parents or maybe even your ex-partner, but you need to feel confident that you can go forward in this life on your own.
That's hard, by the way.
It is.
Like, this is really good, important advice, but it is not simple.
Right.
The whole extrapolating yourself from being a part of a pair and figuring out how to stand on your own 2 feet in all those categories, not just financially, although that's usually the most urgent thing to figure out. But like, am I okay? Am I okay with who I am? Am I okay in this world? I did that work. And I'm so grateful for it. Like, but what a slog.
Yes.
I mean, what a slog.
And I recognize I'm sort of hesitating a little bit for 2 reasons. One is I hear, I heard the advice, just live your life and it'll be fine. And that's a very simplistic and trite kind of way of saying it. Not that people are trying to be trite, but it is true. But I struggled with that. Like, what do you mean just live my own life? And so, for me specifically, it did mean going back to my maiden name, which I had my ex-husband's last name longer than I had my own name.
Yeah,
and it almost felt kind of embarrassing. I mean, I don't know how but it was like, if I'm not expected to be, if I'm no longer his wife. And also there was divorce. I call divorce a family tradition his family had a tradition of family divorce. There were a lot of women, his dad and his brothers, there were a lot of women who had that family last name that were no longer attached to men with that last name.
I see.
And I just did not want to be one of the women. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
one of a long line of women. So for me personally, the way I felt like I am on my own was I took back my maiden name.
Mm.
I also moved to, I mean, it was a nearby, after we sold the house, I was in an apartment. Northern Virginia is this big sprawling place, and I was in an
Yeah.
apartment in a nearby little area. And I really feel like everybody needs kind of a transition
Mm.
space
Mm-hmm.
just to, before you like commit to something long term.
Mm.
Just because I don't know anybody who has gotten separated after a long marriage and has been immediately been able to be like, okay, that's it.
Mm.
I'm ready to go. I'm ready.
Yeah.
And you don't want to, for me, you don't want to connect your sense of place as, okay, this place is crappy. It's because I'm no longer a part of a couple.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So, but so then when I finally was ready to buy a place, and I was fortunate, we had a big family house we sold. I got half the I realized not everybody is in the same situation,
Yeah.
but I moved to a place where, and I became connected. I joined a Unitarian church. I joined a running group. I got myself out there. I
Mm.
volunteered for community activities.
Yeah.
I formed connections, and I formed connections with people. Nobody knew me as anybody other than Laura Stassi.
Mm.
They did not know my ex-husband. They did not
Yeah.
know me as a wife. They hadn't met my kids yet because my kids were grown. And that really helped
Mm.
establish myself. Okay,
Yeah.
I am now a single person going out into this lovely, wonderful world
Yeah.
on my own.
Mm.
So I think everybody needs to, and so for some people, it's much quicker than
Yeah.
others. And that's nothing good or bad. But I do feel like we need to have that in our mind that
Mm.
if we never meet anybody else again, we're
Yeah.
going to be fine. We're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We have 5 kids. And
I
so,
saw that.
yeah, so mine
It's
are still
tough.
here. I still have kids that live here. So I didn't have um the flexibility to just
Right.
pick up anchor and drop somewhere different. So
Yeah.
we're still in the same house. And yet
Yeah.
it's interesting because there isn't just one path. Something about this for me has felt like an anchor. Like
Yes.
this is our home. Like something stayed the same in a way that I loved. Like this is my kid's home and this is the house that I love and this is the place that I love and I'm right next to all my best friends, right next to
Yeah.
my brothers, 4 minutes up the road. Like something about that helped me feel stable when everything else was just going like this. But the
Yes.
internal work of being like, am I going to be okay in this world? That looked
Right.
like a lot of things for me. That was a ton of therapy.
Yeah.
I had to get my health. My health took a major hit,
Yes.
like trauma does to your body,
Sure.
and it took a minute. Like it took a minute just to be in that.
Yeah.
But I do now know that no matter what, I will be okay in this world. I know that
Yeah.
for sure. And that confidence I can't put a price on it.
Yeah.
Like
I agree.
I cannot put a price on it. And I said, I'm not going to be back out there dating until I know that. For me, that's what I needed. I needed to be absolutely okay by myself and
Yes.
in myself and for myself and with myself. And at that point, I felt like I would be okay to add another person to the mix I
Right.
didn't need them. I just wanted them.
Yeah. And the thing about being a mother, which is such a, I don't know, how to say this. I mean, it is who you are. I can't describe to you, everybody who's been through it knows exactly what I'm talking about, but I can't describe when you have children and you've spent all your life, really, that is almost your primary role that you think of yourself. You almost think of yourself as a mother before you think of yourself as a woman or a wife.
Mm.
And when you no longer need to be that hands-on 24/7, thing,
Mm.
yeah, so I can totally see, I was describing my situation about picking up and moving.
Because you were
and
empty
nobody knew
nested already.
because I was empty nested. Exactly.
Mhm.
But I have talked to so many women who did have kids, and
Yeah.
they were like you know what, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to focus on being, yes, get
Uh-huh.
myself healthy,
Yeah.
but focus on my kids, be a mother. This is
Yeah.
you don't want to disrupt them when
Right.
you're going through so much internal disruption. So I totally understand.
Totally. Now, a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. We're in this series on dating and sex and relationships, and I don't have to tell you that this can be difficult, emotional, tricky territory to navigate. That's why it can be so helpful to have a resource like BetterHelp Online Therapy as a sounding board and a healthy support system in your corner. For me, talk therapy, which I always do online, has played a critical role in my newfound strength of recovery from divorce and in learning the joy of my own freedom. Doing that deep internal work led me to a healthier place where I was open to love again. A BetterHelp therapist can help you find your healing path, become a better problem solver, make it easier to accomplish your goals, including dating and relationship goals, and more. Because it's all online, BetterHelp is accessible, convenient, and cost-effective. It's also less intimidating. You're matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey, and you can switch therapists at any time. When you want to be a better problem solver in any category of your life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/forthelove today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/forthelove. Y'all may have heard, but I wrote a cookbook called Feed These People. It comes out October 18th, and I'm just over the moon about it all. But what I'm really excited to finally tell you about today is something we've been working on for months behind the scenes. And that is the All the Dish tour. Because that's what I'm doing. I'm bringing All the Dish to a city near you from November 4th through November 10th. Y'all, it's been 3 years since I've done a tour. Now, just so you know, this is not an actual dinner party, but it is a party for sure. Complete with fantastic DJ. Obviously, dancing in your seat is highly recommended. Some super fun guests, y'all. Surprise guests who you are actually going to go crazy for. Just you wait and see who's popping in. I just can't with it. Plus, we're going to have a special Q&A. I'm talking just so much more. It won't be a party, of course, without you. So bring all your people to the event and you will leave freshly, inspired and entertained and connected and just all fired up, I promise. All right, find your city and get your tickets for my All the Dish tour at jenhatmaker.com. I literally cannot wait to see you there. Obviously, times have changed since you and I went on our first dates a long time ago. So things have changed, structures have changed, the way we meet has changed, everything's changed, but also we have changed. We have changed. Thank goodness I am not the same person I was when I walked down the aisle at 19. Of course, we grow up. I literally grew up. And my life changed in wonderful ways. And so looking in on modern dating later in life where we're at, not that kind of scrappy, young, marriage, where you're just kind of throwing the thing against the wall, like we'll just make it together and there's just 2 kids in the world. We're not there anymore. That's not where we're at. And so in your opinion, particularly in our space, what has been the most dramatic difference in cultural expectations of what it means to date, to be dating, to even even in a relationship, at our stage of life? How are people at this point reshaping what it could mean to be dating or even in a committed relationship?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's so many facets to this, because when I started this exploration, it was before the pandemic. And I have to say the pandemic has been a game changer in ways
Right.
good and bad.
Hmm.
So the big thing when I first got back out there was there seemed to be, and I don't want to paint men with a broad brush,
Sure.
heterosexual men with a broad brush, but it seemed to be that a lot of women my age were encountering men who had just come out of long-term marriages.
Yeah.
A lot of them had teenage sons where they could
Sure.
see their sons were sexting and texting and
Yeah.
free love and all this. And they
Sure.
did not experience that when they were younger. And they were
Right.
like, time for me to sow my
Oh,
wild oats.
sure.
And being online was like, look at this. This is like a
Mm.
kid in a candy shop.
Yeah.
In fact, before the pandemic, I was on a radio show, 1A, based out of WAMU, but it's a national show. And we were talking about older dating. And one man called in Florida and he said, why would I commit to one woman when there are 5 or 6,
Yeah.
contacting me, ready to blah, 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 blah.
That's
And I'm
true.
like, yeah. And so that's why it was kind of scary
Mm.
because it's like, okay, we all, we can have sex whenever we want, but
Yeah.
should we? I mean,
Mm. Yeah.
um, and when I say should we, is it worth potentially the emotional,
Sure.
the health, the physical health,
Sure.
or is
It's
this
not
now?
inconsequential. There's some things to consider, and maybe at the end of the consideration, you go, "Yeah, I should." But
Right.
you're right; it's not inconsequential. Right.
Right. It's a factor that maybe we should all be thinking about instead of just jumping into things. But if you want to jump into things, that's fine, as long as you're telling other people, as long, like if I just want sex, I think I should let you know, I just want sex.
Yeah.
But so that's why I was really going slow through this, because I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't had sex with,
Another
anybody
person.
else. Yeah. And it's like, and it's so hard to meet people because you look online. Can you really get to know someone just by their picture and a write-up? Yeah. And then everybody was saying, okay, don't worry. Men go through this when they're first divorced, but then eventually they're going to want to settle down.
Huh. And
I'm like, okay, well, what does settle down mean? Does that mean remarriage? Does that mean a committed relationship? But so even before the pandemic, couples were creating committed partnerships that weren't necessarily embracing all the traditions of a tradition. Weren't embracing all the aspects of a traditional committed relationship.
Right.
They might live together but without legally being married.
Sure.
They might legally get married but not live together full time.
Yeah.
I mean, they might, there are all kinds of we can form relationships, and the details of the relationships are up to us, which is a kind of a beautiful thing.
It kind of is.
Yeah. And so, however, I have to talk about the pandemic, because the pandemic, in some ways, when I say it was a game changer in a good way, no longer, if we're being responsible people, no longer are we doing quick hookups, or people are getting to know each other. They were getting to know each other through video chats or phone conversations or emails before even deciding to meet in person. So some traditional courting kind of came back, which is good. I talked to a couple, it was right when the pandemic, right after the lockdown. It was like a botched speed dating event, but this man started emailing this woman, and the other emails she was getting, were full of typos and, hey, baby, and grammatical errors. But so she was giving this man a chance, even though he was older than she wanted, and he had grandchildren, and he was retired. And she was like, no, I don't want that. She was a widow. And then he sent her a picture. She had no idea what he looked like. And he sent her this horrible picture of himself.
Okay.
And she was like, okay, well, then she thought, well, maybe we can be friends or whatever. But anyway, they spent 6 weeks getting to know each other. She then FaceTimed him or whatever and saw, okay, he just takes horrible pictures.
Okay, sure.
So by the time they met in person, face to face, they really felt like they knew each other. Okay, long story short, they're now living together,
Sure.
planning on getting married.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need a bit of a runway. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes things are pretty clear pretty quickly. But now, like in this new world, especially at that time, like toward the beginning of the pandemic, when literally in person just was barely an option, I can see this. Okay. This is all right, Laura. So I am dating a man. And I want to talk to you about this because one of the things that you've talked about on your show is in midlife dating is dating across differences. And in a variety of ways. At this point, of course, we've all lived a lot of our lives. And so we have even more pronounced differences, frankly, than we did when we were 21. And so I said that I made like a little mental list of probably the type of guy that was going to like work for me, the type of guy I'd probably ultimately fall for if I was going to fall for anybody. And so I said, I mean, hell, I'm 47. He's probably going to be divorced. That's going to be probably normal. He'll probably be a dad. That's also kind of like a traditional guess for somebody about in my age. He's going to have to live in Austin. I live in Austin, Texas, because I don't have the bandwidth or the energy for a long distance relationship. Probably look like me a little, like
adorable.
So the man that I'm dating lives in Nashville, first of all. He's a 6'2" black guy with like dreadlocks.
Oh, I love
and he's never been married. He does not have kids. He's the only child. I'm the oldest of 4. And we all live here too. My family's like a pack of wolves and we all live here. And like a very fierce, loyal pack of wolves, if you will. Only child, vegetarian. My dad was cattle rancher. It's absurd. We laugh about it all the time. And he's just like, do you think I was looking for a divorced woman with 5 kids? I'm like, hell, no, I hope you weren't. That'd be dumb of you. And so we are now in this like loving relationship, but it is across every difference you can think. Racial lines, our adult history, we built our adult lives completely differently. Like he built sort of this single life and I built a family. And then how we structure our lives, like all his closest people are single and all my closest people are married. And I mean, it's just a deal. And so I would have missed him though, if I said, these are probably my parameters. I'm only going to look inside of them. We stumbled upon each other. We got introduced by a mutual friend. We had a mutual friend and we were both in New York at the same time. And it was with my friend. She's both of our publicist. And she goes, I have a brand new client. He is in town and he wants to go see the same show as you tonight. Should I connect you? It was like that.
I love that.
But left up to me, I'd have missed him.
Yes.
I would have missed him because I wouldn't have looked. I wouldn't have looked outside of the parameters I thought were right. Can you talk a little bit about staying open toward, we just don't know at this age who we're going to meet and who might just delight us and like love us so well. And frankly, for me, Tyler has made me very expansive. I feel like I've learned so much about a different way to be like also a wonderful adult. And a different way to build a meaningful community outside of what I always did. And so, that was very long. That was a very long runway.
I love you use the word open because I had a note to myself, which I don't think I said when you asked me the question. But one thing that would behoove all of us is to learn how to be more open with everything. And for some of us, I feel like I'm more open mainly because I was sort of forced into it.
Yeah.
When you're forced into singles world after being in married land, if you stay close-minded about anything, I don't think you're going to have a happy life.
Oh yeah.
And so if you're open to possibilities, whether it's, I don't know, exploring different career paths or different hobbies or activities you want to do, being open is going to lead you to then be open to meeting different people than you would normally meet.
That's true.
And sometimes those people lead to other people who lead to people that you want to form romantic connections with.
Yeah.
Or that you just, or that something happens, because we all know we can have our checklists, but at the end of the day, there's got to be some kind of indescribable, undefinable spark that you've connected with this person in some way that makes you want to get to know them better, that makes you want to be around them. So I love that your publicist introduced you, because the thing about online dating, and I say online, I mean the apps as well as, the old-fashioned be on a website. But there have been so many conflicting studies. Some studies say that's the best way to meet a partner, especially if you're in a thinning dating market, and thinning dating market is older people. It's also gay, LGBTQ people. That's a thinning dating market, supposedly. So on the one hand, you've got people saying, everybody needs to be online because that's the only way you're going to meet people. But when you are online, they do ask you, what are you looking for? And if you are so specific about what you're looking for, you are going to miss people. And I tell them the story about my sister, my younger sister. I have 4 sisters. One sister is the only one who's been divorced. She, got online at one point, and this was when they were asking you to describe your body type.
Oh gosh.
And so it's like, I think it was, thin. She wasn't thin. She wasn't, could use a few pounds heavy. They were so specific, but she decided curvy. We are curvy women. So she was active and she's fit, but she's curvy. So she described herself as curvy. And then a few months later, she met a neighbor. They kind of fell in love. He lived a few miles down. He was 10 years older. But anyway, long story short, they've been married a dozen years. They realized they were both on the same dating site at the same time. The algorithm never put them together, because my now brother-in-law, he was married to a very athletic woman, can like to do stuff. And so they asked him to describe his ideal woman, and he put athletic and fit or skinny or thin or whatever. He never thought, okay, a curvy woman is able to do the things I'm able to do.
Oh yeah.
So, which is totally false. So,
of course.
But how do we keep ourselves open? Because there are some things that I personally, if there are some political differences, I think it's really difficult to be open to the possibility to have a romantic connection. With somebody of a different, vastly different political belief.
Of course. In that case, there could just be so much you would have to overcome to connect.
Right.
You might never get there. Yeah. I understand that.
Yeah. But I have talked to people. I interviewed a couple, and she met this man through friends. And they were total political opposites.
Okay.
And I'm like, how do you maneuver that? And the Pew Research study has found, Pew Research Center did a study on political differences, and they did find the older we get, the more set we are in our ways, especially when it comes to willingness to date somebody of a different political persuasion.
Interesting. So there are deal breakers, and that's okay too. I would have probably, I guess there has to be some factor out there for me too, that I would just say, this is going to be too hard for us to connect through. But then there's a bunch of others that might surprise you. You may just be surprised that.
And sometimes we need to look at what our prejudices are. And when I say prejudices are, like, I think I heard what you said about you figure you want a man with kids. Because my prejudice against men without kids is, how can they possibly understand what it's like to be a parent if they don't have kids of their own? And so, but that's my prejudice. That's not fair to, And so if you start looking at what's on your list and why it's on your list, then maybe we do become more open to possibilities that aren't on our list.
It's so true. I was just having a conversation with 2 of my man friends, longtime friends. We've been friends forever. And they're both, one of them has been married to my best friend for 100 years. And one of them is divorced, but in a committed relationship. And we were talking about my relationship, which is real fun. It's real fun for everybody to come in with their ideas, their opinions. And they were both like, it's so funny because my friend who was divorced, but in a relationship right now, was going through this whole thing about how at our age, he's 50, at our age, I don't know that we'll get married. I'm not sure that feels like we have to, or that we need to, that it would change our commitment to one another. Right. So he gives this whole speech about how there is some really like beautiful freedom inside just being committed without like all the legal parameters wrapped around it. And then on the heels of that, as they turned the lens to me, both of them said, if I ever only had one red flag, with Tyler, it's that he was never married. I'm like, how does this make sense? You just said there is a beautiful space that might not include marriage. And yet your prejudice looks at somebody who chose that all along. And when I love my life, I love what I've built. I love my career. I love my friends and my community. And they're like, I know that is internal. That's like something we've internalized, that there's some sort of value, like a moral value to have been somebody who just chose that. And that's really not true. No, it isn't true at all.
I would say too, and again, this is totally my prejudice. Has he ever been in a committed relationship?
Yes.
So I think a lot of us tend to equal marriage means committed relationship. But it doesn't have to. I mean, so somebody can have that experience. Somebody could have very legitimate reasons why they never wanted to get married and also did not want children or could not have children.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be, we should be more open to thinking beyond what we automatically assume that means.
That's right.
And that's what I mean to be open. And it's been, I mean, it's not a quick thing. I mean, I'm still kind of a geographic snob. I hate to say it, but if somebody lives, it's not the distance they live, it's where they live.
Where they live, sure.
Yes, I don't want to travel too far down south of 95.
Yeah, that's their geographical subculture, and it matters. Yeah, it matters. That's their worldview. It's who their probably neighbors and parents and friends are. So that is a factor. And I think that's okay for us to say, this is going to be beyond the capacity of compatibility. And make choices like that. For me, being ideologically aligned is monumentally important. I can't, that's a river I can't jump. If we see the world and people this differently, that would never work for me either. So I have my limits. You guys, I did a thing. I wrote a cookbook, and it's called Feed These People. And her big debut is coming in hot soon. I am so damn excited to put this cookbook in your hands. I literally cannot wait. Writing this cookbook's the most fun I've ever had. Literally a dream come true for me. I love sharing my adoration of cooking and food with all of you. And this cookbook is the cream of the crop, like my absolute best, favorite, sure thing recipes. We have cookbook sections like food for breakfast or brunch so you can drink, food for your picky spouse or spawn, food when you have no more dams to give. I mean, it's real food for real people with recipes like Texas migas and green chili taco cups. One that I titled Risotto with Whatever You Have, peach corn cakes. It just goes on and on and on and on. So much. And you better believe there's a picture for every single recipe, because that's the unspoken rule of cookbooks for me. I eat and I love, and you should too. This is a win-win for all of us. Y'all, Feed These People is coming in hot October 18th, but you can pre-order it if you're extra and want all the extra pre-order goodies. Oh, we've got a whole pile for you, like freebie recipes, cooking videos, shopping lists, virtual showcase with some of the best, like most amazing women in the world that you love, and more, all the good stuff. Head over to jenhatmaker.com/feed these people to get in on this. So that's jenhatmaker.com/feed these people. I want to ask you this. I know I have so many more questions that I cannot even get to, but I do want you to speak into this one because I don't, up here where we live, I don't hear a ton of people talking about this. And so I find myself like looking for instruction and wisdom, which is dating at our age and money and finances. Like in our younger dating years, we were lucky if we had enough money to just go to the movies and get a burger, and we were just scrapping it all together. But in our midlife years, a lot of us have established ourselves and our career, our retirement, what we're building to pass on to our kids if we have them. Or flip side, some of us are suffering financially because of divorce or whatever other reason. That ship is tilted now. But likely we had some sort of system with our previous partners, good or bad. And it was something we became accustomed to. And so there's the whole idea of like merging lives together in the middle. But what about our money? How do we do that? Can you answer? Do you have an answer?
So this is a perennial topic on Dating While Great, finances specifically, and then finances come up a lot because I'll just give you an example of this couple I interviewed, Marge and Bob. They were in their 80s. She had been single on her own for, 30 or 40 years. She divorced and then, and he had been married once, short-lived, then he was married a second time, and then he was widowed. Anyway, they got together and they had their own places, and Marge could take care of herself just fine, and Bob had money to spare. And she insisted when they went on dates, like they would take turns making dinner because she really just did not want to have Bob thinking anyway that she was trying to take advantage of him or whatever. But they ended up, they got married and they were going to live apart, but they decided to live together. But at one point, Marge wanted to buy a place and her financial planner told her it's not a good idea at your age to buy something. So Bob bought it because he knew she wanted it and she rented it from him. And I remember talking to the millennial producers about this and they were like, oh my God, that's so weird. That's so weird. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
He wanted to do this for her. He was able to do this for her, but she did not want to take advantage of him. She paid him rent. I think we need to all be careful that we don't put up walls so quickly that we preclude possibilities, I guess. I mean, we don't want to be taken advantage of. We don't want to be scammed, but we also need to just take a breath. Like I talked to this woman who doesn't even date anymore because she had a long career. She's never been married. And she feels like anybody that she dates, they're going to want to take advantage of her. They're going to want to move into her house. They're going to want her to pay for all the trips. And then I've talked to men who are like, you know what? Like one guy I talked to was a social worker. He had a good career, but he never made huge money, but he has no debt. He has his, and he's like, no woman wants to go out with me because, they don't see a lot of extra money. Money is one of those things that if you're going to become involved with somebody, you need to talk about it.
Yeah.
And maybe that means you don't commingle. Maybe that means you don't live together without a cohabitation agreement, which people have, even if the minute you start kind of joining lives officially or unofficially, you want to be very clear about finances. It's something that you should talk about as easily as you talk about sex, which is it's so much easier for me to talk about sex than it is to talk about money. Because
100%,
it feels like, yes, you feel so even more vulnerable talking about what you have or haven't accumulated or your debt or what you're doing for your kids. And maybe you shouldn't be doing it for your kids. So I would say also, somebody just told me this, an expert just told me this. When you're starting to date someone, you kind of get clues about their financial philosophy or literacy. Like if they're, like this one woman told me she was dating this guy. He had told her that he had some money trouble, but he was working his way out of it. But he was coming over for dinner and he was bringing like $100 $100 bottles of wine and,
Uh-huh.
$70 steaks. And she got to the point, she was like, look, if you're in financial trouble, why are you continuing to spend this way? But she ran a credit report on him
Mm.
and found out it was even far worse
Oh,
than she could ever have imagined.
yikes.
So I know. So I guess the thing is to kind of pick up clues. What do they like to
Yeah.
do for fun? Are they overly generous? And if they're overly generous, can they back it up? Are
Mm.
they flashing their credit card?
Yeah.
So, but it is something to talk about,
Yeah.
maybe not right away, but if you
Mhm.
do think that you can kind of go down the road with someone, don't you want to find out what their philosophy
Definitely.
is before and what
Definitely.
they have and maybe don't have, and if they're willing to work on it with you or,
That's good.
yeah.
So, like, one last question before I'm going to be forced to let you go have the rest of your day. The other conversation you just brought up is sex.
Yeah.
Because this is also for most of us, we've been having sex our whole lives, but it's new frontier with a new person.
Yes.
Or with new people. Like if you're
Yeah.
kind of dating around,
Yeah.
this is a big part of it. It is
Yeah.
like, and in a ton of ways, and a super exciting part of it because
Yes.
we're our bodies, we're better at this than we used to be. Like, and for women, even this is like some prime time. And so, and for men, what am I saying? Men are primetime sex people until they're dead. So can you talk a little bit about sex, as you kind of re-enter the dating world? You've got a new partner, which is for a lot of us, a whole new deal.
Yes.
And it can be nerve-wracking. It can be incredible. It can be all kinds of things. And so do you what is your advice here? Do you have guardrails? Do you have standards? Do you have kind of best practices that more or less keep people not just protected, but also like having a great time, like enjoying sex at this new stage?
Yeah. So, oh gosh, we could have a whole
I
conversation
know.
just about sex. And again, all my expertise is based on what experts have told me,
Okay.
experts and daters. And a lot of us are coming into this not having great sex in the past or not having any sex in the past. I mean, or the sex life has just petered out. Well,
yeah. Well, so it's very on the nose, very on the nose.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the thing that's really important for everybody, men and women, know yourself.
Yeah.
Know what you like, know what you want. Experiment with yourself before, so that you can communicate with a partner what you like. And, I mean, there's all kinds of statistics about, the majority of women it's not penetration that that leads to orgasms for women.
Right.
And so, and as we get older, our bodies still function, but they function in different ways. There's some, it's just a different, like I just talked to a sexuality educator. People still orgasm, but maybe the path of our orgasm is different So yes, get to know yourself before you can communicate, so that you can communicate to a partner and so that you can hear from them. What do they like?
Yeah.
And then there was one exercise I'll leave you with, and this was told to me by Jane Fleischman, and it's called body mapping.
Okay.
And you talk to a partner and you just say, let's just touch each other. Tell me what feels good. Tell me what you don't like. And you do this without ever thinking it's going to lead to intercourse or penetration.
Okay.
And that's just a good way of getting to know each other together.
Yeah.
So yes. And
love that.
You can get the STI rates are rising highest among the oldest population. So you should get tested for the things that you're able to be tested about. Share your results with your partner, make sure make sure you guys are ready to go from a health standpoint.
Yeah, that's great. I love this. And I think that's a great approach to sex with a new partner, which is curious, not self-conscious. This knowledge of your own body is primary. Just absolutely primary. Can't expect somebody else to please you if you do not even know how to do it your own self.
Exactly. And that is one thing we never did very few, maybe the younger girls, maybe that's something that's being taught to them, but it was not taught to us.
Oh no. Oh gosh. Yeah. Oh no. Oh, we never had this conversation. Nobody had it with me. I'll tell you that. Yeah. So we're just shooting in the dark. We're just trying to figure that out. But yeah, there's so many sexual resources for men and women at whatever age and stage we are in. Because of course, a lot of our bodies are either approaching or they're menopausal. And so that also changes our bodies.
That's we haven't even talked about menopause. And let me just say, this is one thing I learned just recently and I was shocked. Men can have orgasms without erections.
What? Gosh.
I know.
Why do they get everything? Why is it so easy for them?
What I'm saying is, I think that it's a good thing for women to know, because as men get older, sometimes they don't get erections like they used to when they were younger. And so they're embarrassed about that or surprised or whatever. And so sometimes they stop doing any kind of sexual intimacy. Like, oh my God, if I can't get an erection, I can't have sex. But you can have sexual intimacy without penetration. I just want everybody to know that, so that tell men if they don't know that. And
that's good.
There's no need to end sexual intimacy after you get to a
lots of stuff to do. There's tons of stuff to do outside of sex. Come on, everybody, get creative. Okay. Thank you for all of this information. Thank you for normalizing it. That alone is empowering, just to not feel like alone out here in the world of dating, in the middle here. It's great to know. And also it's great out there. Okay. That's a reach. Maybe it's not great out there, but there's so much potential, and it can be wonderful. A wonderful experience. I've discovered new things about myself as a grown person in a new relationship that I had no idea. I didn't even know. And it's been a wonderful season of discovery, self-discovery, relational discovery, sexual discovery, all of it. Everything is, it's like holding up a new mirror and going, I kind of like it. I kind of like what I see.
Yeah. And I personally have met so many people, dating partners and just other women that I never would have met if I had continued down the road of being married. So I just think life, it is different. It's not worse. It's a different life. And I just want everybody not to be, not to be afraid of that.
That's so great. It's different. It's not worse. Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay. Yeah. Laura, I have one final question for you. I actually ask every guest this question. So you can please answer this literally however you want. It can just be earnest and sweet, or it can just be ridiculous. I love them all. I borrowed this question from a priest that I love. Her name's Barbara Brown Taylor. Here's the question. What is saving your life right now?
Okay. I love this question because it really does force you to think about beautiful things.
That's right.
This is such a stressful period for everybody right now. It's horrible. We can all go down a depression hole if we chose to focus on that. Plus, at the end of February, I lost my dog, and this dog had been with me. She was not even 8 years old. She got cancer. And for the first time in my life, really, I was totally on my own. And that's been a hard adjustment.
So sorry.
In May, my 27-year-old daughter moved back in with me. Now, it's a temporary thing for her.
Yeah,
and I'm sure she's not thinking this is a positive thing in her life necessarily. She wants to be on her own. But I have to say, and I've been, we are giving each other space, but at the same time, thank God we each have our own bedroom, each have our own bathroom.
Of course.
But it's been just lovely being able to kind of have somebody else in the house and feel revisit my mother stuff, which I had forgotten about. So.
Oh, that's so nice. My oldest is 24. So I know what you're saying. When they come back for whatever little season as a grown adult, it's so fun. They're so fun. I like who they are. Like,
Yes.
you're interesting. And I love the adult you. And so I think that it's fantastic. I love that she's there and that you have
she's dating, which is fun.
Oh, I bet it is.
We made a deal. No overnight visitors for either one of us.
Okay, great. That's perfect. And until you don't want that deal to go on, keep it in place. If it is your house, you can be like, guess who's going back on the deal? I am. Okay. Can you just tell my listeners where they can find you, all the things? Like, I will have a ton of listeners who fall into this camp and want more, need more, absolutely want to have like more content from you.
If you go to datingwhilegray.com, we finished 3 seasons. The 4th season starts in the fall. We have a microcast season as well, but everything is on datingwhilegray.com, and they can also sign up for the e-newsletter on that page. I have a book coming out in September. It's called Romance Redux, Finding Love in Your Later Years.
Nice.
And you can also go to the Dating While Gray Facebook page. And
perfect.
Yes, we're a supportive community. If anybody has any questions or even a story they would like to share, they can write at datingwhilegray@wunc.org.
Perfect. I'll round up all those links for my listeners so they can find you quickly and easily.
Great.
Thank you so much for being on today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your personal experience, your best practices. It was like so interesting and fascinating to talk to you.
I feel like we could talk about a lot more. So we'll have to talk again.
I got a list of things I didn't get to. So we might need to have a repeat. Okay, Laura, thank you so much. Okay, you guys, I loved that conversation. I'm so grateful to Laura for coming on. So what I will do for you, listener, over at jenhatmaker.com, under the podcast tab, I'm going to have everything about this particular episode. I'll have the show notes and then everything that Laura just mentioned, all her spaces and links and website. I'll have it all for you. So you can just head there for a one-stop shop if you are interested in more of what Laura is talking about and more of her content and her upcoming book, of course. And so thank you for being in this series with me. Thank you for all that you've been sharing about it, your stories, your experiences, how our guests are meeting you where you're at, what you're learning. It's so great to not feel alone, and absolutely have loved putting this series together for our podcast community, which we are obsessed with. So on behalf of Laura and her whole podcast crew, and Amanda and I, we love you. We think about you all the time. We're constantly building and dreaming and planning for this show, which is really just dreaming and planning for you. So if you haven't already subscribed, go do it wherever you get your podcasts. Also, don't forget, we're always over on YouTube. We video record every episode as well, if you'd like to just watch the conversation. So you can head over to my channel over there if you'd like it. Okay, you guys, more to come next week. You're not going to want to miss a single episode in the dating and sex and relationship series. All right, see you next week.